When my daughter-in-law's mother looked at me, she smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. It was the polite kind. The kind people give when they're not sure what to say. I remember standing there by the doorway of their grand living room, my hands holding a small paper bag of homemade jam I had brought as a gift. I thought it would be something warm, something simple to break the ice. But as soon as I stepped inside, I could feel it. The quiet difference between their world and mine. Their home smelled of perfume and new furniture. Everything was spotless, shining tiles, silver frames, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a movie. And there I was, in my plain dress and old shoes, trying to smile even though my heart was already shrinking. "Ah, you must be Daniel's mother," the woman said, my daughter-in-law's mother. Her name was Mrs. Everett. Her voice was soft, but it carried a chill that brushed against my skin. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, trying not to sound too nervous. I wanted to say something kind, something like, "It's so nice to finally meet you." But before I could, she had already turned to her husband and whispered something I couldn't hear. Daniel's wife, my daughter-in-law Emily, quickly walked over and took my hand. "Mom, please come in," she said softly. Her eyes were gentle, but I could see worry hiding behind them. Maybe she already knew how different we looked standing side by side. I smiled and stepped inside. Every movement I made felt heavy, like I was walking on thin glass. They invited me to sit down. I sat carefully at the edge of the couch, afraid my old skirt might wrinkle their fancy cushions. The air was quiet, except for the ticking of a big wall clock and the sound of porcelain cups clinking on the table. I placed my paper bag in front of them. "I brought some jam," I said with a small smile. "Made it myself. It's blueberry. Daniel always liked it when he was a boy." Before we begin, if you enjoy stories that touch the heart and remind us of life's quiet miracles, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It truly helps our little storytelling family grow. For a second, no one said anything. Then Mrs. Everett laughed softly, almost politely, and said, "Oh, how sweet. You made it yourself? That's quite lovely." She turned to her husband. "We haven't had homemade jam in years, dear." Her husband, Mr. Everett, didn't even look up from his phone. I kept smiling, pretending not to notice. What they didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that I wasn't just being polite. I was testing them. Yes. That day, I acted like a poor, naive mother, because I wanted to know, would they still respect me if they thought I had nothing? Would they still see me as someone worthy to sit at their table, to call family, if they thought I was just a simple village woman with rough hands and a quiet voice? I could have come dressed in my best. I could have told them about the small bakery I ran back home, the one I had built after years of hard work, the one that kept our family afloat when times were rough. But I didn't. I wanted to see if kindness could exist without appearances. So I stayed quiet. I let them talk. I listened as Mrs. Everett spoke about her friends, her travels, the expensive wedding she had planned for her only daughter. And every few minutes, her eyes would slide toward me, just for a moment, as if checking whether I understood her words, or whether they were simply floating above my head. I smiled every time. I nodded. I played my part. And when Emily tried to involve me in conversation, her mother would gently interrupt, saying things like, "Oh, darling, your mother must be tired from her trip. Let her rest." Rest? No, I wasn't tired. I was watching, listening, seeing everything that kindness hides and pride reveals. Later, as dinner was served, on plates that looked too pretty to touch, I saw how everyone used polite words, gentle tones, perfect manners. But beneath that tablecloth of elegance, there was distance. Distance between their world and mine. And it wasn't made of money. It was made of judgment. That night, as I lay in the guest room they had prepared, I thought of my son, of how happy he looked with Emily, and I whispered to myself, if this is the family he's chosen, I'll love them too, even if they never see who I really am. I closed my eyes and smiled in the dark. Because sometimes silence teaches you more than words ever could. And that was only the beginning of what I was about to learn. When I was younger, I thought life was supposed to be loud, full of laughter, children's cries, and the sound of pots clanging in the kitchen. But after my husband passed away, our little home in the countryside became very quiet. It was just me and my son Daniel. He was only 12 then, thin, shy, with soft brown hair that always fell over his eyes. He was the kind of boy who said thank you, even when he didn't need to. We lived in a small wooden house my husband had built before Daniel was born. The paint had peeled in places, and the front steps creaked when you walked on them. But it was ours. Every inch of it carried memories, laughter, tears, the smell of warm bread that always seemed to drift from the kitchen. I worked at a small bakery in town. It wasn't much, but it was honest work. Every morning before sunrise, I would walk down the narrow road with my apron folded under my arm. The air would be cold and quiet, and I'd whisper a small prayer. Not for wealth, not for success, but for strength. Because strength was what mothers like me needed most. Daniel used to wake up early too, sometimes just to help me pack bread or wash the dishes. He was such a gentle soul. Sometimes I'd worry that the world might be too harsh for him. But every time he smiled, that fear would melt away. He was my world. And as he grew older, I realized that he carried not just my love, but also my late husband's dreams. When Daniel finished school, he got a scholarship to study in the city. I still remember the day he left. The morning sun lighting his face as he stood by the bus stop with his suitcase. He hugged me tight. "I'll make you proud, Mom," he said. "You already have, sweetheart," I told him. I tried to sound brave, but when the bus pulled away, I cried quietly all the way home. The house felt emptier than ever. But I never stopped baking. Maybe it was my way of keeping him close, because every loaf of bread, every pie, every jar of jam reminded me of him. Years passed. Daniel worked hard. He found a good job in the city, a steady one, something to do with engineering. He'd call every weekend, and every time I'd hear his voice, I could almost picture the little boy he once was. Then one day, he called with a tone I hadn't heard before. A softer one. "Mom," he said, "there's someone I want you to meet." That was the first time I heard Emily's name. He spoke about her with a kind of tenderness that made my heart warm. "She's kind, Mom. You'll like her. She makes me laugh." I smiled as I listened. Every mother dreams of hearing her child speak that way. Not just about love, but about happiness. When I first met Emily, it was through a video call. She had bright eyes and a warm smile. She called me Mrs. Clara and thanked me for raising Daniel. Her voice was sweet, and she looked genuinely kind. After that call, I went to bed that night feeling peaceful. Maybe, I thought, my son had found someone who would love him the way I always had. Gently, sincerely, without conditions. But life has a way of surprising you. A few months later, Daniel told me they were getting married. It was sudden, but he sounded so happy that I didn't question it. He said Emily's family wanted to host a dinner, a small get-together before the wedding, so that both families could meet properly. At first, I was excited. I wanted to make a good impression. I even thought of wearing my best dress, the one with little flowers on the collar. But then something made me pause. I remembered something Daniel had mentioned once, just in passing. He said Emily's parents were a little traditional. They cared a lot about appearances, manners, the way people spoke and dressed. He had said it lightly, like it wasn't a big deal, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice. I began to wonder, what would they think of me? I was just a small-town woman with flour on her hands, and a heart full of love. No fancy education. No vealt. Just simple ways and simple words. That night, as I stood by the window watching the stars, a strange thought came to me. What if I didn't try to impress them? What if I met them just as I was, plain, honest, and maybe even a little naive? Would they still welcome me? Would they still treat me kindly if they thought I had nothing to offer but my heart? It wasn't pride that made me think that way. It was curiosity, and maybe a quiet wish to see if the world still held kindness in unexpected places. So I made a small plan. When I met them, I would act a little humble, a little unsure, like someone who didn't know much about city ways. I wanted to see if their kindness was real. When I told my friend Martha about it, she runs the grocery shop in our town, she laughed. "Clara, you're testing them? Oh, you're braver than I thought." I smiled. "Not testing, just observing." She looked at me for a moment, then said softly, "Be careful. Not everyone deserves your softness." I didn't fully understand what she meant then, but later I would. The week before the dinner, I spent every evening preparing a small gift, something personal. I made jars of my homemade blueberry jam. Daniel had always loved it, and I thought it might show them a piece of who I was. I tied little ribbons around each lid and placed them in a brown paper bag. Nothing fancy, just simple, honest work. When the day finally came, I stood in front of the mirror before leaving. My dress was plain, my hair neatly tied, my shoes old but clean. I looked at my reflection and whispered, "Just be yourself. Whatever happens, be kind." The journey to the city was long. The roads were busy, the buildings taller than I remembered. Everything moved faster. People, cars, even time. When I finally reached Daniel's apartment, he greeted me with open arms. He looked so grown up, confident, calm, with that same gentle smile he'd had since childhood. "Mom, you look beautiful," he said, taking my bag. I laughed softly. "Oh, I'm sure I look out of place here." "Never," he said firmly. "You'll always belong." For a moment, my heart felt light, but as I followed him into the apartment, I saw Emily standing there, radiant, elegant, with her parents beside her. That was the first time I saw them, Mr. and Mrs. Everett. And even before anyone spoke, I could already feel it. That quiet, invisible wall between us. Still, I smiled and greeted them warmly, because that's what mothers do. We lead with kindness, even when we're unsure. I placed the paper bag with the jam on the table and said, "A small gift from my kitchen." Their eyes flicked to the bag, then back to me. Polite smiles, polite words. And as I sat there in their beautiful home, I realized that my little experiment had begun. The dinner at the Everett's house began beautifully, on the surface. The table looked like something out of a magazine. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, candles that gave off a soft golden glow. I remember sitting there thinking, it's lovely, but also feeling small. Emily sat beside Daniel, her eyes shining with excitement. I could see how happy she was, and that alone gave me comfort. If she loved my son and he loved her, then maybe everything else didn't matter. But as the evening went on, I began to notice the small things. The kind of things that only a mother notices when her heart is paying attention. When I spoke, Mrs. Everett's smile would stiffen, polite, but guarded. When I tried to serve myself a little salad, she would quickly reach over and say, "Oh no, dear, let me, you might spill." Her words were gentle, but her tone wasn't. It was as if she believed I wasn't capable of handling a simple spoon. Mr. Everett said very little. He sat at the head of the table, checking his phone between bites. He'd occasionally look up and say something about the city, about how life out here was faster, smarter, more competitive. Then he'd glance at me, as though wondering if I understood what he meant. Daniel, bless his heart, kept trying to include me in every conversation. He'd tell stories from his childhood, how I used to wake up at dawn to bake bread, or how I taught him to ride his bike on the dirt road behind our house. He laughed as he told them, but every time he mentioned those simple country things, I saw Mrs. Everett's expression tighten. At one point she said, "Oh, how sweet. You must have had such a humble upbringing, Daniel." Her voice lingered on the word humble, stretching it just long enough for it to sting. I smiled and said softly, "It taught us to be grateful for small things." She nodded, but I could tell my answer didn't mean much to her. Dinner continued in that quiet, careful way, words floating politely across the table, but never truly reaching the heart. After dessert, Emily invited me to see her room. It was beautiful, full of soft colors and framed photographs. One photo caught my eye. It was of Daniel and Emily at the seaside, laughing together. "They look so happy," I said gently. Emily smiled. "They are." Then she turned to me and said something that stayed with me. "You raised a good man, Mrs. Clara. Daniel is so kind. Sometimes too kind." "Too kind," I repeated softly. She laughed a little. "He never says no to anyone. Even when people take advantage." I smiled but didn't reply. I understood. Kindness often makes people underestimate you. Before I left the room, she looked at me with a small hesitation and said, "I hope you won't think less of my family. They can be particular. They mean well." I touched her hand gently. "I know. Families are like bread, my dear. You need to let them rise slowly, can't rush the warmth." She smiled, though I could tell she didn't fully understand what I meant. That night, when everyone went to bed, I sat by the window in the guest room again. The city lights flickered outside, and I felt so far from home. I thought about Daniel's smile, about Emily's gentleness, about her parents' polished manners. I didn't feel angry, just thoughtful. Sometimes people don't realize when they hurt others. They just live in their world and forget that kindness costs nothing. Still, a small ache began to grow in my chest. The next morning, Emily suggested we go for breakfast at a cafe near the park. Daniel was busy with some work calls, so it was just the two of us. I was nervous. I didn't know what to say to a young woman who had grown up with everything I never had. But as we walked together, I realized she wasn't cold at all. She asked about my hometown, my bakery, my garden. I could tell she was genuinely curious. When I told her about the blueberry bushes behind my house, she laughed. "That's where the jam comes from." I nodded. "Yes, the same bushes Daniel used to steal berries from when he was little." She giggled, and for a moment she looked like a child, free, simple, unguarded. I liked her then very much. At the cafe, she told me that her parents had high expectations for her. "They've always wanted me to marry someone, well, someone from our circle," she said quietly. "But I chose Daniel." "Why?" I asked gently. She smiled softly. "Because he listens. Because he makes me feel calm. And because he looks at people, really looks." I nodded. "That's how you know love is real." But then she sighed. "I just hope they'll come to accept everything." Her words stayed in my heart long after we returned home. That evening, we all sat in the living room. Mr. Everett asked me what I did back in the countryside. "I run a small bakery," I said. "It's just me and 2 helpers. We bake bread and pies for the neighborhood." He raised an eyebrow. "A bakery? Oh, that must be tiring." Mrs. Everett added, "It's sweet that you still work at your age. Most people would rather rest, don't you think?" I smiled. "Work keeps me happy, and busy hands make for a peaceful heart." They nodded politely, but I could sense what they were thinking. That kind of pity that hides behind politeness. Later, when Emily went to the kitchen, I overheard Mrs. Everett whisper to her husband, "She's so simple. I don't know how she raised a son like Daniel." Those words cut quietly, not sharply, but slowly, like a paper slicing through skin. I could have spoken up, but I didn't. I just folded my hands on my lap and kept smiling, because I had decided to see this through. To watch how far kindness could reach before pride pushed it away. 2 days later, they invited me to a small pre-wedding family lunch at their country club. It was elegant, tall glass windows, people dressed perfectly. When we arrived, Mrs. Everett introduced me to her friends. "This is Daniel's mother," she said. "She's from the countryside. Runs a bakery." She said it like a confession. I smiled and nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am. Just a small one." One of her friends chuckled and said, "How charming. Real homemade bread. You don't see that often anymore." I could tell she didn't mean it cruelly, but her tone felt like she was talking to a child. Throughout the lunch, I watched how everyone treated me, kindly, but never equally. I was invisible in plain sight. When dessert came, Emily tried to bridge the silence. "Mom's jam is the best," she said. "You all have to try it someday." Her mother gave a light laugh. "Perhaps for the wedding favors?" she said, glancing at me. I smiled. "If you'd like, I'd be happy to make them." "Oh no," Mrs. Everett said quickly, waving her hand. "It was just a thought. We'll have them catered professionally." I nodded again and took a quiet sip of water. That night, when we returned home, Daniel noticed my silence. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked gently. I smiled. "Of course, dear. I'm just a little tired." He sat beside me on the couch. "They can be a bit much sometimes. Please don't take it personally." I looked at him. "Daniel, my love, I don't mind. They're your family now. And love doesn't need everyone's approval to be real." He hugged me then, tightly like the little boy I used to hold after he scraped his knees. And I thought, this is why I came. Not to be respected or praised, but to make sure that no matter what, Daniel's heart stayed kind. Because in a world full of polished words and fancy homes, kindness was the rarest luxury of all. The morning of the bridal fitting was bright and golden. Emily had asked me to come with her, saying she wanted me to see her gown. I felt honored, not because of the dress, but because she wanted me there. When we reached the boutique, I waited quietly while she tried on different gowns. Each one made her look like something out of a dream, graceful, glowing, delicate. As she stood before the mirror in her final choice, I saw Daniel's reflection in my mind. I imagined him seeing her for the first time on their wedding day, his eyes soft, his smile full of love. It made my heart swell. Emily turned to me. "What do you think, Mrs. Clara?" I smiled. "You look like someone who's about to make a promise, and keep it." She blinked, then smiled. "That's the sweetest thing anyone said today." While she changed, I stepped outside for a moment. The shop assistant offered me a seat, but I preferred to stand by the window. I watched people passing, couples holding hands, mothers with children, laughter floating through the air. That was when I overheard them. Two women, sitting near the counter, were chatting softly. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't heard Emily's name. "Oh, the Everett wedding," one said. "I heard the groom's mother is quite plain." The other laughed. "Yes, apparently she's from some small-town bakery. Can you imagine?" My hands tightened around my purse. I didn't say a word. I just turned my eyes to the street again. It wasn't the words that hurt. It was how easily people say things without knowing the heart they're talking about. When Emily came out, glowing with happiness, I smiled as if nothing had happened, because I refused to let bitterness touch her joy. The next week, the families met again, this time at Daniel's apartment, to discuss final wedding details. It was meant to be simple, just the four of us. But simple things have a way of becoming complicated when pride enters quietly. Mrs. Everett came in with her usual grace, a small leather bag in her hand. She smiled at Daniel, then looked around and said, "It's cozy." Her tone was kind enough, but I caught the faint trace of surprise, maybe disappointment. She placed a list on the table. "Here are some ideas for the wedding menu. I've already contacted the caterers." Daniel looked at her, puzzled. "But Mom and I were thinking of something simpler. Maybe a small reception." Mrs. Everett smiled thinly. "Darling, weddings are not meant to be simple. They're meant to be memorable." Emily looked caught between them, her eyes full of quiet worry. I reached out gently and said, "Mrs. Everett, your ideas are lovely. But what matters most is that they start their life together with peace, not pressure." Her smile faltered. "Of course," she said softly. "Though, I suppose some of us value appearances differently." The words were like tiny glass splinters, sharp, but easy to hide under politeness. Daniel frowned, but I touched his arm lightly. "It's all right," I whispered. "Let it go." He didn't argue. He never did. A few days later, Daniel had to leave for a short business trip. He asked me to stay with Emily and help her with wedding errands. I agreed happily. I thought it would be nice to spend some time just with her. On the second day, while I was helping tidy up the living room, Mrs. Everett stopped by unexpectedly. She looked surprised to see me there. "Oh, you're still in town?" she asked. "Yes," I said with a smile. "Daniel asked me to help Emily while he's away." Her eyes flickered toward Emily, who was coming down the stairs with a small smile. Well, I suppose that's helpful." We all sat for tea. The air was calm, but something in her tone made me uneasy. After a while, Mrs. Everett said, "Emily dear, you should be careful about the image your new family gives. People notice things. How you present yourself, who you surround yourself with." Her words drifted, but their meaning was clear. Emily glanced at me, embarrassed. "Mother, please." "It's all right," I said gently. "I know what she means." Then I smiled and added, "I've never been much for appearances. They fade faster than kindness." She smiled too, but I could tell she didn't like my answer. Later that evening, while Emily was in the kitchen, I accidentally overheard Mrs. Everett talking on the phone in the hallway. Her voice was low, but the words came through clearly. "Yes, the groom's mother. Sweet woman, but clearly not our kind. I just hope she doesn't embarrass us at the ceremony." I froze. My hands went cold. It wasn't the insult that hurt. It was that word, embarrass. As if love could ever be something to be ashamed of. When she hung up, she noticed me standing there. Her face stiffened. "Oh, I didn't see you." I smiled quietly. "It's all right, Mrs. Everett. You don't have to explain." For a moment, she looked uncertain, maybe even guilty, but pride returned quickly. "I was only saying what any mother would say," she murmured. I nodded. "Yes. Any mother wants the best for her child." Then I turned and walked away before the tears could rise. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window again, the same place I always found my peace. I looked out at the city lights, thinking of Daniel, thinking of the family he was about to join. And for the first time, I felt doubt. Had I done the right thing pretending to be poor and simple? Maybe if I'd shown them who I really was, strong, capable, independent, they would have respected me more. Or maybe not at all. I took out my phone and scrolled through the photos Daniel had sent me. Pictures of our bakery, our old home, our garden in springtime. Simple things. Ordinary things. But every image was filled with love. And suddenly, I understood something. It wasn't me who was being tested anymore. It was them. And the way they treated others was showing who they really were. No act could hide that forever. The next morning brought a quiet surprise. Emily came to my room, holding a small envelope. "I found this in Daniel's old box," she said. "He must have meant to show you." I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter, my husband's handwriting. He had written it before he died, addressed to Clara, for when Daniel grows up. My hands trembled as I read. "Clara, one day, our boy will build a new life far from home. When that day comes, remember, your love will always be his foundation. Don't measure your worth by how others see you. You've already given the world your gentleness, and that's enough." By the time I finished reading, my tears had already fallen. Emily sat quietly beside me. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry for what my mother said." I heard her too. I looked at her, surprised. "She didn't mean to hurt you," she continued. "But she did. And I can't stay silent. I love Daniel, and I love you too. You're family to me." Her voice broke a little at the end. I took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you, my dear. You don't need to defend me. Life will teach her one way or another." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. That morning, for the first time, I saw the woman my son had fallen in love with, brave, kind, honest. A few days later, Daniel returned. Emily told him everything. He wanted to confront Mrs. Everett immediately, but I stopped him. "No, son, I said softly. Don't turn love into a battlefield. Let time do its work. Sometimes, silence can speak louder than anger. He hesitated, then nodded. That evening, we all sat together for dinner once more. Me, Daniel, Emily, and her parents. The air was heavy, but I decided it was time to end the pretending. After dessert, I stood up and said, Mrs. Everett, may I show you something? She looked curious. Of course. I took out my phone and opened a few pictures of my bakery, the shop front, the shelves of bread, the customers laughing. I never told you, I said quietly, but I run this place back home. It's small, but we serve the whole town. We bake for weddings, festivals, birthdays. We've built it with love and hard work. She blinked, clearly surprised. I didn't hide it to deceive you. I continued. I just wanted to know. Would you have treated me the same if you thought I had nothing? Silence filled the room. Even the air seemed to pause. Mrs. Everett's eyes softened. For the first time, I saw a crack in her pride. She lowered her gaze and said quietly, Perhaps not. And for that I'm sorry. Her husband cleared his throat, uncomfortable, but even he couldn't find words. Emily reached out and held my hand under the table. I smiled. It's all right. We all learn at our own pace. That night, as I prepared for bed, Emily came to hug me. You changed her, you know, she whispered. She's never apologized to anyone before. I smiled softly. I didn't change her, dear. I just gave her a mirror. The days that followed were calm, almost too calm. Mrs. Everett didn't visit or call for nearly a week. I thought maybe I had pushed too far by showing her who I really was. But deep down, I believed some truths need time to settle before they bloom. Then, one afternoon, Emily came running into my room, breathless. She's here, she said softly. My mother's downstairs. She wants to talk to you. I felt a flutter of nerves, but I smiled and said, all right. When I entered the living room, Mrs. Everett stood by the window, her posture less rigid than usual. She turned around and gave me a small, hesitant smile. Mrs. Clara, she began. I wanted to see you, not for the wedding plans. For myself. I nodded, waiting. She took a slow breath. I've been thinking about what you said, and what Emily told me later. About the letter from your husband. Her voice softened. I realized something. You didn't just raise a good man. You raised a man who loves deeply, because he learned from you. Her eyes glistened. And I was wrong to judge you. I'm sorry. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My heart swelled, not with pride, but with peace. I reached out and took her hands. You have a kind daughter, Mrs. Everett. That kindness came from somewhere, maybe from you. So let's not dwell on what was. Let's start fresh. She nodded, tears quietly falling. And just like that, the wall between us crumbled. The next few weeks were filled with the sweet chaos of wedding preparations. This time, everything felt lighter. Mrs. Everett invited me to join her at the florist. We spent an afternoon surrounded by roses and lilies, talking not as two mothers defending their pride, but as two women who finally saw each other's hearts. She asked about my bakery, genuinely curious this time. I told her about the early mornings, the smell of bread, the laughter of the children who came for leftover muffins. She smiled softly and said, You've built something beautiful, Clara. I see where Daniel gets his patience. For the first time, I felt truly seen. The wedding day arrived with golden sunlight spilling through the church windows. I woke early that morning, long before anyone else. The world was still quiet. Only the sound of birds and the soft hum of dawn. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, whispering a small prayer to my late husband. He's grown now, love. You'd be proud. Today he starts his new journey. And I think, I've finally made peace with the world we built for him. The tears came, but they were gentle, like the rain that blesses the earth after a storm. At the church, everything was radiant. Emily looked like a dream, her gown glowing softly under the sunlight. Daniel stood tall, nervous, but full of quiet joy. When he saw me enter, he came and hugged me tight. "Mom," he whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you." I smiled through my tears. That's what mothers are for. Then Mrs. Everett came up behind us. She placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Clara, come sit with me at the front. We're family now." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. As we sat together, side by side, the ceremony began. When the vows were spoken and the rings exchanged, I felt something deep inside me finally settle. All the years of loneliness, of missing my husband, of worrying about Daniel, they softened into one simple truth. Love doesn't end. It just changes form. Sometimes it becomes silence, sometimes it becomes forgiveness. And in that moment, I forgave everything, the hurt, the misunderstanding, the pride, because none of it mattered anymore. After the ceremony, there was laughter, music, and clinking glasses. Daniel and Emily danced beneath fairy lights, their smiles lighting up the whole garden. I stood near the edge, watching them, and Mrs. Everett came to stand beside me. "They look perfect together," she said softly. "Yes," I replied. "Two good hearts finding their way." She turned to me and smiled. "Clara, would you come visit us sometimes? After the wedding? I'd like that." I looked at her, truly looked, and saw not pride anymore, but warmth. "I'd like that very much," I said. Later that night, as the music faded and guests began to leave, Daniel and Emily came over to me. "Mom," Daniel said, "Emily and I decided something." He looked at her, then back at me. "We want to move closer to home after the honeymoon. Maybe help with the bakery, maybe just be near you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, and my eyes filled with tears. All I could manage was a whisper. "Oh, my dear boy, you've already given me everything I need." He smiled, hugging me tightly. Emily hugged me next, whispering, "Thank you for teaching me what love looks like." And that was when I knew. Every tear, every lonely night, every moment of silence had led to this peace. A few days later, I returned home. The bakery smelled just as it always had, sweet, warm, alive. As I opened the windows, sunlight poured in, lighting up the photo of my husband that sat on the counter. I placed a small bouquet beside it, the same flowers from Daniel's wedding. "Everything turned out fine," I whispered. "He's happy. And I think I am too." For a long moment, I stood there, surrounded by memories, the kind that don't fade, even when time moves on. Then I tied on my apron and began kneading dough. The familiar rhythm filled the room, steady and comforting. Outside, the church bells began to ring in the distance, the same bells that had rung for Daniel's wedding. And I smiled, because sometimes peace doesn't come in grand moments. It comes quietly, like the smell of warm bread in a small kitchen, simple, healing, full of love. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pride. In the end, love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers, "You're home." In the end, forgiveness didn't change the past. It changed our hearts. Sometimes, peace doesn't come from winning an argument, but from choosing love instead. Thank you for listening. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of hope and healing.